they don't grow on trees. I got bills to pay, I got mouths to feed. There ain't nothing in this world for free. I know I can't slow down, I can't hold back, though you know I wish I could. I know there ain't no rest for the wicked until we close our eyes for good.
In a world where criminals are caught and pay the ultimate price, one state stands above all. New Jersey.
It's
Texas. Texas holds more than 4 times the number of executions than any other state in all of America. Today we are gonna venture through the wrinkles of time, across countries and oceans and seas and large land masses, and also islands and rivers, to discover where state-sanctioned execution really began.
Hammurabi, leader of the law in ancient history. Before Christ took his first breaths, the Babylonian king created a set of rules that would forever change history. The Hammurabi Code of Laws. Among the rules and creeds, he listed the very first death sentences. Of the original 288 laws that he composed, 20 of them were punishable by death.
Law 153. If the wife of one man, on account of another man, has their mates murdered, both of them shall be impaled. Law 155. If a man betroth a girl to his son, and his son have intercourse with her, but he, the father, afterward defile her, and be surprised, then he shall be bound and cast into the water. Law 157. If any man be guilty of incest with his mother after his father, both shall be burned. Thank you.
Each crime had its unique and graphic punishment. Although unknown at the time of its creation, this relatively primitive constitution would become the grandfather of all legal bills and laws for generations and civilizations to come.
100 years later, the advancements in technology allowed the Egyptians and Hittites to develop advanced execution techniques, including the extremely complex sack. The Egyptians and Hittites would place a criminal in the sack, then toss them into the Nile River, a river symbolizing much more than just a water source. This river hosted a number of Egyptian deities and provided for the yearly harvest. The Egyptians believed if the gods wanted you to live, then you would be able to survive this impossible task in the holiest area in Egypt. If the criminal was able to avoid drowning, they would be pardoned of all crimes. This test of faith was essentially an effective and less violent form of executions than the Hammurabi codes to rid of unneeded criminals. In the Hittite Empire, the death penalty was used far less often than in the Code of Hammurabi. Even murder, which receives capital punishment for the Hammurabi Code, resulted in enslavement of the offender. Crimes punishable by death related primarily to offenses against the gods or the king, frequently due to uncleanliness, which was very important to the Hittites. Over the centuries, Hittite law featured less of the death penalty. Often, the penalty resulted in a large fine depending on the social class of the guilty party. More serious crimes eventually resulted in enslavement or banishment, even though the death penalty was still in effect.
A well-educated and creative democratic society, Athens used the death penalty as well. The democratic Athenian council would often hold trials with the punishment of death as a viable option. Unlike Babylon or Egypt, Athens was civilized about their methods of killing. Using hemlock, a lethal poison, criminals found themselves with an end far less painful than crucifixion or death by the extremely complicated Egyptian sack. Even one of the most famous philosophers of the time, Socrates, was executed with hemlock. But what is a civil society compared to a violent one? Rome exercised public and brutal displays of execution.
Rome, unlike Athens, was not a democracy, and yet Rome successfully governed their empire for over 200 years. Run by the Senate and the Consul, Rome expanded into one of the most powerful empires in Europe. The legal system could afford to be merciless, and therefore eliminated the idea of a painless and idealistic punishment. Give the public bread and circuses, and they shall be happy for a lifetime. Give a government a cross, and their streets shall forever be free of criminals. Rome combined both ideas. Bread and circuses were fueled on the ultimate goal to establish a society rid of crime, and to promote public entertainment. The laws and morals that govern this new form of cruelty and efficiency were written down on the 12 tablets.
12 tablets to rule them all. Forged in the fires of Rome, these stone edicts were forced upon the people in order to uphold justice in this grand empire. Today we're here with Dr. Hadrian Ashley Jr. the 26th, an expert on Rome. So you're a Roman expert. Tell us about this violent society.
Well, it certainly wasn't like other societies at the time. It was very bloody. Not ineffective, but extremely bloody. They enjoyed a lot of public executions, crucifixions. That was their entertainment system at the time. If there was a criminal that went without execution that was bloody or just destructive, it just would have been a perfect waste of a perfect body.
So tell me about the executions in this famous society.
Well, as I said previously, they were very bloody. Aside from crucifixion, there was, of course, the method of gladiatorial fights, where they would put a criminal in a ring to fight against a gladiator.
I'm assuming these weren't just two warriors?
No, of course, as I said, this was a criminal against a gladiator who was considered the noblest of warriors. Of course, they were pretty much just hired executioners for public entertainment. It was a pretty effective method of getting rid of their criminals. They provided the public with sufficient entertainment, and they cleaned their streets with popular... Can you stop it, please?
So crucifixion became extremely popular during the Roman Empire. We all know about the most famous case, Jesus Christ, and the figure he then became. Why was crucifixion so popular, and what was Jesus' crucifixion like?
Oh, well, crucifixion was an inexpensive and painful death for any of the criminals that ancient Rome housed. It provided public entertainment and showed the citizens of Rome what the Roman Empire truly represented. There were times during history where the streets of Rome were filled with thousands of crucified criminals, not only displaying Rome's power, but also showing other criminals what Rome would do to them if they did the actions that criminals did. Jesus was no exception. His proclamation of his role as the Son of God and of his beliefs ensured him as an enemy of Rome, and his crucifixion outside of Jerusalem was Rome's retaliation and punishment for his naive behavior. Jesus Christ...
Thank you for that. And we come back after this commercial break. England in the 16th century.
How happy are people who save 15% or more on car insurance?
Happier than a Roman and a gladiator fight.
Get happy. Get Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
Although it was the age of discovery, it certainly wasn't the age of reason for the monarchy. Henry VIII was one of the most infamous monarchs in the realm of bloody supremacies. He allowed no sympathy regardless of position or status. Repeatedly, he beheaded and disposed of European citizens who were unfortunate enough to find themselves in his way, including his own wives who were unable to provide a son and an heir to uphold the influential reign.
Among the wives he beheaded, he killed and executed nearly 70,000 people during his rule.
Henry VIII created many laws to provide sufficient reason for these outlandish executions. The mainstream execution method at the time was a practice referred to as hung, drawn, and quartered. In the tradition, the convicted criminal was dragged behind a horse to the gallows where they were hung. There they were then emasculated and disemboweled, followed by the inevitable quartering, where the criminal's limbs were severed. Their pain and suffering finally ended with a swift death, delivered with a conventional beheading.
While England celebrated its unique execution process, France gifted the world with possibly the largest innovation in execution techniques. A machine, a symbol of death, a dark cloud of fatal threatening that resided over a den of thieves and criminals. Joseph Ignace Guillotine, a physician, submitted his design for a contraption known as the guillotine to the French National Assembly in 1789. His intention was not to promote executions or to give them an excuse, but rather to make them cleaner and more humane. His invention had a tall frame with a blade situated at the top and a notch in the bottom for someone to place their head. Upon the given order, the blade would fall and sever the head from the body. When the National Assembly agreed to accept his design and to utilize its potential, Guillotine refused to allow them access unless they agreed to his own 6 bills to be passed. 1. That all offenses shall be punished in the same way. 2. Any law that results in death must be executed in the same way, regardless of the severity of the crime. 3. That the punishment of the guilty party not bring any harm to his or her family. 4. That a condemned person will not be publicly ridiculed because of their sentence. 5. That a condemned person's property will not be seized. And finally, that the body of the executed person be returned to their family. The French National Assembly agreed to Guillotine's rules and began construction on the death machines. Their tall nature made them a beacon of suppressive forces, an organized contraption that, despite its function of creating a fleshy mess, remained unstained. Most heads lost to the blade came about during the French Revolution, when people on both sides were executed publicly with guillotines. Their public horror brought about such a deafening, eternal scream that people created new names for this monstrous contraption.
The regretful climb. The national resort. The widower. The men of silence. The machine. The cutter. The necktie of Louis. The patriotic shortener. The wooden justice. The prize of the assassins.
Many would think that in the 20th century, the guillotine would have never been used, except perhaps by evil men in an evil time. While it is true that it was utilized by perhaps the evilest of men, Adolf Hitler, and brought an end to over 16,500 Europeans between 1933 and 1945, the guillotine was not abolished in France until 1981, following the execution of 2 murderers in 1979. But just because its use has been abolished does not mean its design will never see light again. Has the guillotine seen the inside of its last neck? We may never know.
Originating as a colony of the British Empire, America practiced the death penalty regularly. The SB file, a record of all American executions, contained over 15,000 deaths from the 1600s to 1991. The first recorded execution was hosted in Jamestown. In 1608, Captain George Kendall was executed by firing squad for allegedly spying for the Spanish. The second instance came for theft in 1622. Over 100 years later, the American Bill of Rights was signed with 10 amendments to the Constitution. In the 8th Amendment, it stated that there can be no cruel or unusual punishment. The death penalty was losing support and only remained for very serious offenses, such as murder, rape, treason, and worst of all, horse thievery. Political groups emerged as the varying levels of support began to clash. People began to search for a cleaner and quicker way for a prisoner to die. New York became the first state to use electrocution to kill a prisoner. Thomas Edison had publicly presented electricity's potential killing power on a group of unfortunate animals. After the two horrific world wars, people were much more sensitive toward the death penalty. Support for the death penalty dropped even further when many Western countries, including Britain and France, abolished capital punishment. Eventually, the states Alaska, Hawaii, Delaware, Oregon, Iowa, West Virginia, Vermont, New York, and New Mexico all abolished capital punishment during the 1950s and 60s.
So, tell me about the history of the death penalty in America.
Well, it started primarily with the firing squad and hanging as the most prominent ways for execution. This later moved to electrocution, and finally lethal injection.
Could you elaborate?
Well, it is estimated about 200 people were executed by firing squad. Hanging was also a popular method. Although most hangings were not by law, the act was commonly referred to as lynching and was very important in the late 1800s. Electrocution, an electric chair, came about in the early 20th century following the invention of the light bulb by Thomas Edison. The condemned person would be strapped into a specially built wooden chair and electrocuted through electrodes placed on the body. This execution style was very controversial and was soon eclipsed by the quick and painless lethal injection.
What? Oh, yeah. Okay, thanks. We're done here.
Lethal injection was a more humane method of capital punishment. The inmate is strapped to a gurney and is connected to a heart monitor. 2 intravenous lines are inserted into his veins. These lines are set up in a separate room or behind a curtain as the inmate is put under a sheet. First, he is put to sleep with anesthetics. The second chemical release is intended to paralyze his muscle system and breathing. Lastly, potassium chloride is injected, which stops the inmate's heart. The public found this method to appeal to the Constitution's 8th Amendment. Many other methods seem to fall under cruel and unusual punishment.
Oh hey, didn't see you there. My name's John Doe. If you or one of your family members has recently taken an extreme amount of potassium chloride and are suffering from the following, including death, extreme asphyxiation, chronic never waking up disorder, and end of life, you may be eligible for some moderate compensation. If you feel like you might be eligible for that compensation, I recommend you call the following number: 1-377-477-5777, and yes, one more 7. Again, that's 1-852-666-6996, and yes, one more 6. Life is as fragile as a mere stick. Life is less fragile with our help. Give us a call.
The usage of capital punishment is universal, relentless, and unending. Its impact today may be focused on a smaller number of people, but its effect is catastrophic. From an ancient tradition to a modern political conflict, the death penalty has shaped the decisions, morals, and foundations of countless civilizations. With every generation comes a new technique or view towards a collective decision to eliminate a citizen, the controversial agreement about who has the right to take a life. From piracy to murder, from heresy to treason, in times of war and times of peace, for the old and the young. Regardless of race, religion, status, or gender, what makes us mortal is our ability to lose it all. A loss that can occur within an instant.
Okay, can I just say something crazy?
No, this is Pete Carroll.
All my life has been
Be
a series
careful.
of doors in my face. And then suddenly I bump in.
What's the script?
Driving me nuts. Oh no, Brian.
Red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow leather.
I was thinking the same thing. Because like I'm searching my whole life to find my
When you come into a game like this,
Are you guys recording this?
That's so weird.
I want to watch Pete Carroll.
Don't touch me.
Tap me. Javelin toss.
That's too fast.
God damn it!
And it's nothing like I've ever known before. Love is an open
Stop playing this
Love is an
stupid
open
song.
How old are you? 14-year-old?
I'm 15.
That's too old.
Too old.
Too
We don't
old.
want that old.
Way too old.
She's,
She's,
you know-
practically Kunigunde.
Practically, like,
She's practically
if this
missing
was
a buttocks.
France, you'd be like short of buttocks.
Hey, let's try this thing
If I
called
lean
shutting
back,
up.
and then I'm gonna...
I went the wrong way.
Yeah. How does it feel?
Oh my god.
Suck it.
Oh my god.
Can you move